Hello and welcome to Mudpuppy Palooza at the Belle Isle Nature Center. Today we're bringing the festivities to you virtually, so join Detroit Zoological Society's Nature Center's Director Amy Green and Nature Center's Manager Erin Parker as we learn all about mud puppies. We'll conduct a science experiment that you can do at home, we'll have an art project that you can do and then share with us, and we'll even cover some of the ways that the DZS is involved in better understanding the mud puppy populations here in the Detroit River, ensuring that they thrive now and into the future. Are you ready to celebrate Mudpuppy Palooza?
Hi, and welcome to the Belle Isle Nature Center. I'm Amy, the Nature Center's Director for the Detroit Zoological Society. Today we're going to celebrate one of Michigan's most misunderstood animals, the mud puppy. Have you ever heard of a mud puppy? Mud puppies, also called water dogs, are fully aquatic salamanders. This means that they're amphibians related to frogs and toads. Like all amphibians, they hatch from eggs laid in the water, but unlike most other salamanders, they don't eventually go through a metamorphosis where they lose their gills. Their beautiful red frills help them breathe underwater throughout their lives. Have you ever seen a mud puppy? Mud puppies can be found throughout Michigan, though they love cold, clean water and are sensitive to water pollution. They like hiding at the bottom of lakes, rivers, and streams in plants, rocks, or logs. They come out at night to feed. They love to eat things like crayfish, snails, and other aquatic organisms, and they use their great sense of smell to find food. If you look closely, you can see that they do have tiny eyes, but their eyesight probably isn't very good. To better understand mud puppies in the wild, including right here in the Detroit River, staff with the Detroit Zoological Society work on a project where mud puppies are fitted with tiny computer chips for identification before being returned to the river. This fieldwork, along with the testing of the Detroit River's water chemistry, helps scientists understand more about mud puppy population size and the overall health of the river ecosystem. We celebrate Mudpuppy Palooza here at the Belle Isle Nature Center at the end of March. And this year, we'll have to celebrate virtually. Our amphibian curator describes and presents our mud puppy work with a model mud puppy and highlights some of the tools that she uses in her field work. We often also celebrate with mud puppy masks and cookies and other things that we can do to figure out how to support and celebrate these indicator species. What are some things you can do to learn about and celebrate these unique creatures that share our waterways?
Metamorphosis is the process of growing from an egg to an adult. Think about the butterfly. A butterfly starts out as an egg, hatches out into a larvae, we normally call them caterpillars, and then it spins a chrysalis, and after a few days it will finally emerge as an adult. With amphibians, the process usually follows an egg or egg mass laid in the water or very damp area, which hatch out into aquatic swimming larvae with gills. You might call them tadpoles, and then through time and some slow changes like growing legs, becomes an adult that spends most or all of its time on land. So that was our eastern tiger salamander. Now with the mud puppy, it's going to start out the same. Here's some mud puppy eggs in the water on the bottom of a rock. Then they hatch out into these tiny swimming larvae with gills. But now check out our adult mud puppies and you'll see they still retain the gills and they're actually living their whole adult life in the water. And you'll notice our mud puppies really like to hide under these rocks. So this is really important because if mud puppies spend their entire life in the water, they're really going to be sensitive to whatever changes happen in the water, whether that's temperature or pollution or water chemistry changes. And so this is why we call them an indicator species, because their ability to survive or not survive, dependent on their environment, is exactly what we mean. It indicates something about the environment. There's our third mud puppy, just made an appearance there. Hi, I'm Erin. I'm the Nature Center's manager here at the Belle Isle Nature Center. Today we're going to set up an activity that actually is going to span a couple of days. So we're going to go over the vocabulary, we're going to go over the materials, we're going to go over the skills, and then I'll set it up with you, and then we'll come back and check it out in a couple of days. So the vocabulary we're going to need for this is permeable, And the other words that we're going to use are indicator species. The materials that we need are 2 hard-boiled eggs, so we'll need to prepare those ahead of time, but maybe lots of you have these around the house because you're celebrating Easter and some of the other spring holidays this time of year. You're also going to need food coloring, or you could use leftover egg dye if you are dyeing eggs. You need measuring tape, or if you're like me, I'm just going to use some string, in this case some yarn and scissors, and a ruler to measure my eggs. You need some clear cups. You need some water. Eventually we'll need a knife and a parent or guardian to help us with that. We're going to cut open our eggs in a few days and see what's happened. And we need some kind of tape or marker to label our experiment with. And then let me move this just a little bit. The skills that we're going to work on today and over the next couple of days with this experiment are predicting, formulating a hypothesis, and using models. We're ready to set up our experiment. So I'm going to take my first egg, and I'm actually going to peel it really carefully. So we want to take that shell off, and I know that can be kind of a pain. We're only going to peel one egg, so don't get too excited about this, and peel both your eggs, otherwise the experiment won't work. And so while I'm peeling the egg, I want to tell you a little bit about what we're doing today. So we're using the eggs not as a model so much of eggs, but we're using them as a model of amphibian skin. And the shelled egg then is going to be like a reptile. So let's remember, amphibians have permeable skin, which means water, gases, other things can move in and out through the skin. And lots of amphibians actually take in some oxygen through their skin. So that's really important. However, it also means their skin might be really sensitive to taking in things that are in the water, like pollution or chemicals. The other egg, our hard-boiled egg with the shell, or a reptile, which has harder, scalier skin. And I want you to predict right now which egg, the peeled egg that represents the amphibian, or the unpeeled egg, the hard-shelled egg that represents a reptile, which one do you think is going to be more sensitive to absorbing whatever's in our water? In this case, it's going to be food coloring. Okay, so before I put my eggs in the dish, I'm going to measure them so I can find out some things that happen. And this is a cool way to measure. I'm going to measure my egg at the widest part, like around the egg's waist. And you'll notice I'm not using a measuring tape because I didn't have one. So I'm just using a piece of string. I'm going to pull it nice and tight around the egg's waist. I'm going to clip it off, and then I can use my ruler. And my peeled egg is, that's 6 inches on the dot. So that's pretty amazing. So our peeled egg is 6 inches. And then let's see, and I'm going to set this next to my peeled egg so I remember that. And then I'm going to do the same thing, exactly the same, find the widest part of that unpeeled egg with the hard shell, wrap it around that egg's waist, just like Humpty Dumpty. I'm going to cut it right there. I'm going to measure it. And wow, I have very uniform eggs. These did happen to come from my own chickens, so it's the same chicken, so that's not surprising. This one is also right on the dot of 6 inches. It's a little bit hard to show you, but I'm going to try here. Okay, there's another 6-inch egg. And I'm going to lay that next to the unpeeled egg. Now I'm going to make sure I put the right egg in the right container. So there's my unpeeled egg. There's my peeled egg. I am going to add, so I've got my water here. I want to measure the same amount of water. I've got 4 cups here, and I think I want to put right about half a cup in here. We're going to see if I can do that without spilling. But I want the same amount of water in each cup. Let's check that. Okay, there's my first half cup. Now I'm going to do another half cup in this one. Let's check that. Just a little tiny bit more. Okay, and now the most important part, and maybe the most fun, we'll get this stuff out of the way here. Okay, now I'm going to take food coloring. My food coloring is green. Any dark color will do. It can be red, it can be blue. You can mix colors if you want, but if you mix colors, you've got to use exactly the same number of drops of each color in each one. We want these to be completely the same, other than one is peeled and one is unpeeled. Okay, so I'm going to add 10 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm gonna add 10 drops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, that last one didn't want to come out. I'm going to very gently give them a swirl so all that nice dark food coloring is in there. Okay, so now I want you to remember back, our question was, which egg, the one without a shell or the one with a shell, is going to absorb the most from the water? And you can also start thinking about what you think is going to happen to each egg as it sits for 24 hours. Okay, we'll be back tomorrow. We're back for part 2, and I actually let this go a little bit longer than 24 hours. It's not quite 48 hours, but more than a day. And the longer you let the eggs sit in the liquid with all the food coloring, the better results you're going to get. And so I want to remind us that we made some predictions. Maybe we formed a hypothesis about what we thought was going to happen. And so the only new materials that I have today, I got a little cutting board out and some paper towels just to keep my workspace neat. And then I'm just going to need a butter knife. So if you're doing this at home, make sure you check in with a parent or guardian before you do this part. You don't need a strong knife or a very sharp knife, but we're going to cut into our eggs. So let's remember we've got the peeled egg and the unpeeled egg. And think back to the first part of our experiment. The peeled egg without the hard shell is going to represent that permeable skin of an amphibian like our mud puppy. Here's our model mud puppy. We'll set her there. She's got smooth skin. She lives in the water and she absorbs oxygen through her gills, but she also absorbs oxygen through her skin along with anything else that's in the water. And a reminder, I used dark green food coloring. You might have used a different color, but that food coloring is going to represent all of the things that are in the water. Sometimes we can see them and sometimes we can't. And so we were going to make a prediction or form a hypothesis about what happened to each of our eggs. The peeled egg that represents the amphibians, the hard-shelled egg that represents the reptiles with their harder skin that is less permeable. Okay, so this is the messy part. I got to reach in there and get this egg. And this is our peeled egg. Okay, we can make some observations right away. Whoops, just got splash all over there. So let's look. The color has certainly changed. Okay, I'm going to set our peeled egg there. I'm going to pull out our, okay, and our unpeeled egg has also changed color. So our hard-shelled egg, our smooth peeled egg is really slippery, so it's very much like a nice smooth amphibian skin. Okay, so now let's take our string and see if, remember this was our peeled egg and they were both 6 inches. I'm going to wrap it around the waist of that egg and see if, oh wow. So what do you notice, and this might be a little bit hard to see, I notice that my string around the waist of my egg does not fit anymore. And so this permeable egg here without the shell is actually bigger than it used to be. Let's check our unpeeled egg before we peel it and compare the insides. Oh, and look, so I know again this is pretty hard to see. This egg's waist has not changed at all. Did you make that prediction? Did you think the eggs would change in size or shape? So remember they were both 6 inches. I had to get a new string for our peeled egg here. If you have a measuring tape that will wrap around nicely, you can use that. I'm just going to use my string and my ruler. Okay, so here's my new spot. That egg is now 6.2 inches. So it did get a little bit bigger. We're going to stop for a second, and I am using measuring cups to show you this because I know most people don't have graduated cylinders or other lab equipment at home. This is totally fine. But we need to measure how much water is left in each cup. Okay, so this is the liquid from our peeled egg. And remember that egg expanded a little bit. It grew in size a little bit. Its waist was a little bit bigger. I'm sloshing it around a little bit while I'm holding it, but when it's sitting flat on the table, I can see that I now have 1/3 cup of liquid. Okay, make a prediction about the liquid in the unpeeled egg. That was the peeled egg was 1/3 cup. Remember, we started with 1/2 cup for each. Let's go. Oh yeah. Okay, quite a bit more. Okay, so here is our unpeeled hard-shelled egg. And again, I know it's a little wobbly while I'm holding it, but when it's sitting at the table, I actually am up above that 1/3 cup line, much closer to the 1/2 cup line. It's jostling around a little bit, so it's hard to see. So when you do this at home, see if you can make a prediction about where that water went. Why did one egg expand and one did not? And I'd like you to think about that hypothesis, or your hypotheses if you have more than one, about what you think we're going to see when we crack open our eggs and look at the interior, and then we're going to do a cross section of those eggs and see what has happened. Okay, and now before I cut into our eggs, we're going to cut a cross section at the waist. We got to gently peel our hard egg, and while I'm peeling that egg, I want you to make a prediction about what we're going to find inside. If our hard-shelled egg represents a non-permeable membrane, if it represents something like a reptile, think about what you think is going to happen. And it's a little bit harder to peel than the first egg was a couple days ago because it's been sitting in that water for so long. Okay, almost. Okay. Bear with me here. Eggshell's really sticking to that egg. I'm trying to be gentle so I don't break our egg. There we go. Okay. Okay, so now, right away you notice something. Got a little closer there so you can see a little bit better. Remember, you can do this at home. Okay, so now make a prediction. So that was one thing you could have thought of. So first we learned that the peeled egg with the permeable membrane grew a little bit. The egg did not. So that's one difference that we noticed. The color is very different, right? So that unpeeled egg, remember that egg white just turned dark teal green, and our peeled egg has a little smudges of green on it. But I think some of that is also from my fingers at this. Okay, now I'm going to take my knife, I'm going to wipe it down once, and I am going to cut into my permeable egg that represents our amphibian first. And I just want to cut straight through there, and then I'm going to just wipe off a little bit of that egg yolk, and then I'm going to do the same thing. So let's check it out. Okay, so what happened to the interior of that egg? How far did that color travel? If you look at the less permeable egg that represents the reptile with the harder skin, with a less permeable skin, you'll notice that color did not absorb into the egg white at all, versus the amphibian skin representative. My yolks keep wanting to pop out here. Our color here, representing whatever is in the water, entered that egg yolk, egg white, about 1/4 of an inch. It's going to wrap up and review some of our terms, and we're going to use this plastic turtle, some kind of snapping turtle here, and our plastic mud puppy to remind us about the differences between the mud puppy, which is an amphibian with permeable skin, and the reptile, the turtle, which is a reptile with less permeable skin. And so, again, our amphibian, told you those yolks just really want to come out. Here is our amphibian, the color absorbed pretty deeply into, it's hard to see now because the egg yolk is in the way, pretty deeply into the egg. And here's the reptile. I'll hold on to that yolk. The color did not absorb into the egg white at all. And remember, the color in this experiment represented or was a model for water chemistry or water pollutants that are going to be absorbed by animals that are sensitive to water pollution. So our other term today was indicator species, and an indicator species indicates something about its environment to scientists and to people. So in this case, something like a mud puppy, if its population is doing really well, it probably is a good sign. It indicates to us that the ecosystem that it lives in, that its aquatic environment is in good shape, that there isn't anything wrong. Conversely, if its population starts to decline, or we notice big changes in the numbers of an amphibian like a mud puppy or like a frog, we might start to test the water and the environment and find out, is there something going on that we haven't noticed with the water chemistry or air pollution if it's a different organism. So they're indicating something about the environment. All right, I hope you enjoyed this lesson and are enjoying virtual Mudpuppy Palooza with us this year. Okay, for our final activity today, we are going to do mud puppy mask making, and we invite you to make a mask out of whatever art supplies and materials you have at home. It can be really simple. I made mine out of paper and colored pencils. You can get more elaborate if that is something that you enjoy doing, but we would love to see any mud puppy art or masks that you create, so please take a picture and send them to us here at the Belle Isle Nature Center. And we hope you enjoyed learning about mud puppies, doing the science experiment, and happy Mudpuppy Palooza!